I never thought I would be the kind of woman who sued her own sister. But then again, I never thought my own sister would steal 8 years of my life and use it to buy herself a kitchen with marble countertops. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 35. I design interiors for a living, which means I spend my days making other people's homes beautiful while I spent nearly a decade living in a studio apartment the size of a generous walk-in closet. I didn't mind. That studio was my sacrifice. Every late night, every canceled vacation, every I'll just eat rice and beans again this week, it all went into an account I named, without any irony, the future. AITA $4,000. That was the number that kept me warm at night. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I could take care of myself, that I could walk into a bank and finally, buy a one-bedroom apartment with good light and a fire escape I could put plants on. That was my dream. Small maybe, but it was mine, and Sophie. Sophie was my little sister. 30 years old, beautiful in that effortless way that makes people want to give her things, and absolutely terrible with money. She had bounced between jobs, between apartments, between boyfriends, always with that same dazzling smile that somehow convinced everyone her chaos was charming. When she called me 8 months ago, crying because her roommate had left and she was about to be evicted, I didn't hesitate. I cleared out half my closet, gave her my bed, and slept on a pull-out couch. Because that's what family does, right? You show up. You don't keep score. At least that's what I believed. Sophie lived with me for 8 months. She ate my food, used my Wi-Fi, borrowed my clothes, and though I didn't know it at the time, memorized my laptop password. I never suspected anything. Why would I? She was my sister. The same girl I taught to ride a bike. The same girl who held my hand at our grandmother's funeral. When I left for a 3-week work trip to renovate a boutique hotel upstate, I kissed her goodbye and told her to water my succulents. She told me she loved me. She told me to travel safe. 3 weeks later, I came home to find my apartment suspiciously clean. Sophie had moved out while I was gone. She left a note on the counter in her loopy handwriting, "Found a place with Derek. Thank you for everything, you're the best." I remember standing there holding that note, feeling this strange mix of relief and loneliness. The place felt empty without her mess. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my pull-out couch, and decided to check my accounts. Just routine, just something I did on the first of every month. The brokerage account was gone, not empty, gone, closed. $84,000, vanished into a wire transfer I had never authorized. I couldn't breathe. I called the bank. I sat on hold for 40 minutes, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip my phone with both hands. When the representative finally came on the line, she was polite, professional, and utterly devastating. "Miss Brennan, we show a completed distribution form signed by you. The funds were wired to an external account 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, while I was upstate, while Sophie was alone in my apartment. I told the representative I hadn't signed anything. She put me on hold. She came back and said the form had been mailed in with my signature, my social security number, all my details. We'll open an investigation, she said in that tone that meant absolutely nothing. I didn't call Sophie right away. I think some part of me already knew, and that part was terrified. Instead, I drove. I drove to the address she had listed as her new place in her last text to me. It was a brownstone in Park Slope. Beautiful, renovated, way beyond anything a part-time yoga instructor and an architecture student could afford. I stood across the street for 20 minutes before I saw her. She came out onto the stoop wearing a silk robe, holding a coffee mug, laughing at something Derek said from inside. She looked established, secure. She looked like everything I had been trying to become. I crossed the street. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter. Not for a second. That should have been my first clue. "Claire, what are you doing here? I want to know what you did with my money, Sophie." She didn't flinch. She didn't stutter. She just took a sip of her coffee and said, "I borrowed it. For the house." "You borrowed $84,000 without asking me. I was going to tell you." She leaned against the doorframe like she was bored. "Derek and I needed a down payment. The market was moving. I didn't have time to wait for you to say yes, and honestly, you would have said no. You always say no. You're so protective of that little nest egg, like it's your whole personality. I felt like I was underwater. Sophie, that was my apartment money. That was my future. And this is my future," she said, gesturing behind her. I'm getting married, Claire. I'm building a life, you have a career, you can make it back, you always do, you're the strong one. The strong one, I repeated. Yes, and I'm the one who actually needs it. I needed a win, okay. I needed to show mom and dad that I could do this, that I could be a homeowner, a wife, an adult. You already proved all that years ago. This was my turn. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized she wasn't ashamed. She wasn't even nervous. She had fully convinced herself that my savings were a communal resource she was entitled to because she had less discipline than me, because she wanted something more. You're going to pay me back, I said. It wasn't a question. She laughed, actually laughed. Of course I am, with interest even. We can do monthly payments after the wedding. Don't be so dramatic. I left before I said something I would regret, or before I said something I wouldn't regret enough. I called my parents that night. I told them everything. I expected shock. I expected anger on my behalf. Instead, my mother sighed and said, Claire, you know how Sophie is. She gets excited. She doesn't think. She stole from me, Mom. She borrowed, my father corrected, in that gentle, disappointed tone he usually reserved for Sophie when she failed a class or lost a job. And she said she'd pay you back. Your sisters. This isn't something you bring lawyers into. She forged my signature. There was a pause. Then my mother, are you sure? Maybe you signed something and forgot. You've been so stressed with work. I sat there, holding the phone, feeling something inside me go very still. They weren't going to help me. They were going to minimize this until I gave up and accepted it. Because Sophie was the baby. Because Sophie needed to be managed, not held accountable. Because I was the reliable one, and reliable people were supposed to absorb the damage so the fragile ones didn't break. For 3 days, I tried to be the person my parents wanted me to be. I went to work, I smiled at clients. I picked paint colors and pretended my stomach wasn't in knots. I told myself maybe they were right. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe family was more important than money. Then I found the iPad. Sophie had left it behind when she moved out. It was old. The screen cracked, buried in a drawer of charging cables. I only pulled it out because I needed a charger and I saw it had a little battery left. When it turned on, it automatically connected to my Wi-Fi and a flood of iMessages started syncing. Her messages. To her best friend Amanda. I shouldn't have read them. I know that, but I did. There were dozens. From the day she moved in with me. From the week she stole the money. From 3 days ago. She literally has no idea, lol. She thinks she's so smart with her little budget spreadsheets. I transferred it while she was in Albany. Took me 20 minutes. Her password was her birthday, Claire. Her birthday. Best part. Mom and Dad will make her feel guilty if she makes a fuss. They always do. I'm the one who needs protecting. And the one that made me put the iPad down and walk to my window so I didn't scream, living in my house bought with her money. Poetic TBH. I stood at that window for an hour. I didn't cry. I think I was past tears. I felt something else. A clarity. A cold, sharp certainty that being the good sister, the understanding sister, the strong sister had been a trap, and I was done falling into it. I called Vanessa. Vanessa Chen and I had been roommates in college. She was a litigator now, specializing in financial fraud. When I told her the story, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Claire, this isn't just theft. If she forged your signature on a mailed distribution form, that's federal wire and mail fraud. If she accessed your account from your laptop using your credentials, that's unauthorized computer access. And if she used those funds to purchase real estate, that property is now subject to a constructive trust. She didn't just steal from you. She created a paper trail that could destroy her entire life. I don't want to destroy her, I said. And at that moment, I meant it. Then what do you want? I want my money back. I want her to understand that this wasn't borrowing. This wasn't a mistake. And I want everyone who told me I was exaggerating to see exactly what she did. Okay, Vanessa said, then we document everything. We do this by the book. No screaming, no public scenes, no revenge fantasies. We build a case so solid that she has no way out, so that's what we did. I didn't confront Sophie again. I didn't tell my parents. I became very quiet, very methodical, and very patient. Vanessa subpoenaed the original distribution form from the brokerage. The signature was clearly forged, sloppy, rushed, nothing like my actual signature. We hired a forensic document examiner who wrote a 4-page report confirming it. The brokerage provided the IP logs from the account access, my apartment, my Wi-Fi, the week I was away. Sophie hadn't even been clever enough to use her phone. She used my laptop, which I still had, and Vanessa had a digital forensics expert recover the browser history showing Sophie had logged into my account, downloaded the distribution forms, and looked up wire transfer routing numbers. Then there were the messages. I screenshotted every word from that iPad. The confession, the mockery, the admission of intent. Amanda, when subpoenaed, confirmed Sophie had bragged to her in person about outsmarting her stingy sister. Vanessa filed a civil suit for conversion and fraud, and she accompanied me to the postal inspector's office to file a criminal complaint for mail fraud. Because the form had been mailed across state lines to the brokerage headquarters, it became a federal matter. I didn't realize it at the time, but that detail changed everything. We also filed a lis pendens, a notice of pending litigation against the Park Slope property. Sophie couldn't sell it, refinance it, or complete the title transfer until the case was resolved. Her dream home became a very expensive legal hostage. 2 weeks later, I was at my desk sketching floor plans when my phone rang. It was Derek. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "Claire," he said. His voice was hollow. "I need to know if it's true. What Sophie did." "The lawyers sent me papers. They say the down payment was stolen." I told him the truth, calmly, with dates and numbers. I told him about the forged signature, the IP logs, the messages. I told him I had proof. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he said she told me her parents gave her the money. She told me it was a gift for the wedding. It wasn't. I know that now. He exhaled sharply. "I'm an architect, Claire. I have to be licensed. I can't be associated with mortgage fraud, with title disputes. I can't marry someone who did this. Not just to you, to us. She built our entire future on a lie." He called off the wedding 3 days later. The venue refunded half the deposit. The rest was lost. The title company, once they received notice of the criminal investigation, froze the escrow account. Sophie couldn't close on the brownstone. The sellers, furious about the delay and the cloud on the title, sued her for breach of contract. She lost her earnest money, $20,000 of my money, gone, and the sellers walked away with the house back on the market. Sophie worked as a leasing agent for a luxury real estate firm. When the criminal complaint became public record, her broker pulled her license. You can't hold a real estate license with a pending fraud charge. She was fired the same day. No severance, no reference. My parents called me constantly. My mother cried. My father shouted, "How could I do this to my own sister? How could I humiliate the family?" Didn't I know Sophie was depressed now, that she was seeing a therapist, that Derek had left her? I listened. I didn't yell back. I just said she forged my signature and stole my future. If you think I'm the problem, you need to look at the documents. They hadn't looked at the documents, not until Vanessa sent them a courtesy copy of the forensic report and the message transcripts. My father called me back the next day. His voice was different, smaller. "Claire," he said, "I didn't know. I didn't know she laughed at you. I didn't know she planned it." "I know you didn't," I said. "But you didn't ask either." The case settled 2 days before the civil trial was scheduled to begin. Sophie's criminal defense attorney, paid for by my parents, which meant paid for by their retirement savings, advised her to settle to avoid a felony conviction. She agreed to full restitution. The $84,000 returned to my account with interest. The $20,000 in lost earnest money she couldn't recover, so my father wrote me a check from his own savings. He didn't say it was a gift. He said it was repayment for failing to protect me from his other daughter. I didn't argue. Sophie pled guilty to a misdemeanor fraud charge. No jail time, but 5 years of probation, community service, and a criminal record that means she will never work in real estate, banking, or any position of financial trust again. The last I heard, she was working retail and living in a studio in Queens. Much smaller than the one I had. Much smaller than the brownstone. I bought my apartment 6 months later. 1 bedroom, good light, a fire escape full of plants. I didn't invite my parents to the housewarming. I invited Vanessa. I invited my coworkers. I invited the woman from the brokerage who had stayed late to help me reopen my account and who sent me a card that said, "I'm sorry we didn't catch it. Thank you for making us better." Derek sent me an email months later, not an apology for his part. He hadn't had a part, really, but a thank you for telling him the truth when he asked for it. He said he was moving to Chicago. He said he hoped I was well. I am well. But I want to say something to you if you've stayed this long. If you're the reliable one, the strong friend, the good daughter, the sister who always shows up. Being reliable is not a license for other people to take from you. Being strong does not mean you are indestructible. And love, real love, family love, is not supposed to be a one-way withdrawal from your soul until there's nothing left. I spent years thinking that if I just gave enough, if I just sacrificed enough, if I was understanding enough, I would be loved enough. But the people who truly love you don't require your destruction to build their happiness. They don't need you to be the villain of their story so they can be the victim. They don't steal from you and call it borrowing, then laugh about it behind your back. Sophie didn't just take my money. She took my trust in what family meant. And I had to rebuild that from scratch, with new boundaries, with a new understanding that forgiveness is not the same as permission, and that being family is not a get-out-of-consequences-free card. I am not the villain of this story, but I'm not the martyr anymore either. I'm just a woman who learned that the most important thing you can build isn't a bank account or a career or even a home. It's the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are allowed to defend your own life. And if someone tries to take it from you, yes, even your sister, you are allowed to take it back. All of it.